Hey, welcome to a special edition of 360 with 360 Woodworking. This goes out only to the fans of the woodworking shows.
And in this series of podcasts, we're going to be giving you lots of information on woodworking and tips that you'll be able to use in your own shop.
So today we thought we'd start off, and the topic we're going to talk about is dovetail layout.
Go.
So why did you pick this as a topic, Chuck?
Well, honestly, having been out on the show circuit doing the eastern leg of the woodworking shows for the last 6 or 7 years, my demo was hand cut through dovetails. And invariably during the weekend, I would get 10, 12, 14 people going, how do you do the layout? So I thought it would be really neat to start our podcast here for the woodworking shows by talking about dovetail layout and what each of us does and what those differences are and how we go about it.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, always a hot topic.
Sure.
So you want to kick it off? You want me to start?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think the first thing we should talk about is pins first, tails first. And I know we agree on this because it's always going to be pins first for me. And that's the first thing. But when you talk about layout, you know, I guess the key is, do you structure and lay out each one of these, or do you just go? I mean, I watched a master like Frank Klaus. He just grabs a saw and gets at it, and they always turn out perfect. But that's, 50 years of experience.
Right. Well, for me, and this is pretty much the way I would answer it at the show, is it depends on what I'm doing. If I'm doing drawers, most of the time I don't do a layout. I just do it Frank style. I go Frank Commando.
Wing it.
I just take the saw and start cutting them. But if it's going to be for like the top of a spice box or the front of a blanket chest, somewhere where the dovetails are meant to be seen. The idea there is I go in and I lay out mathematically. I start with a half pin, I end with a half pin, and I try and, get everything nice and even from there.
Right.
And I know that's a little different than the way you do it.
Yeah, and when I got started doing layout. I actually lay out each one of my pins and tails regardless of where they're at. And the reason I do it is, as I started, I wanted to make sure that I practiced sawing each time. And, half the key of what we do in woodworking is sawing to the line.
Right.
So one of the things that I still do today is I'll strike my lines in there and I'll saw to the lines. Even though, my sawing's pretty accurate at this point, I continue to do it. It's just a constant reinforcement for me to practice that. And when you start talking about layout starting with a half pin, that's where I do things totally different. For me, if we're talking about the top of a chest or a spice box, I will start in the back with a half tail. And the reason I do that is I'm rabbiting my sides, and if I want my rabbet not to show through the top, then I'm going to start with a half tail, which covers that area. Other than that, what I found early on was, as you rabbet, you have to do a stop rabbet up there.
Yep, and that's exactly what I have to do. But and you can find historical precedents for both.
Oh, yeah.
But I always looked at it, if I didn't have that half pin on the back side there, whatever the distance was on that half tail, the only thing that's holding it down is the end grain of the pin board.
Yeah, and the connection between the long grain to long grain on the one half that you're making,
Right.
which is theoretically the only place you're getting a lot of support with that.
Right.
But no, I totally understand that. And so looking at my work is case pieces with a 3/4 inch rabbet for the backboards. I've got about a 1 inch half tail there that is only glued on that one spot.
Right. Now, when you lay them out, are you doing the funky divider trick?
No.
Are you just measuring or you kick it? Oh, I'll stick one here, one there, and then I'll measure in between and stick one in the middle, and then keep dividing up that way.
What I generally do is I'll lay out my beginning and ending, and then I'll measure the distance in between and lay that off on even increments, and just make a mark there, a tick mark there. And then as I'm actually drawing in the angle of my dovetail, I'll slide like a 16th on one side and a 16th on the other, and just alternate as I go down. And I'm looking for it to be close. I don't need to lay it out with the dividers, because I don't want them to look like they came off a machine. Right. I want them to look like they were cut by hand.
Right. And what I'll do is I start with a half pin on either side, because that way, once the tail is in there, I've got support on either side. That back side's not going to flap up and down. And the way that I lay it out is I'll take and just toss the 2 half pins on either side of the board. And then let's say I want to have 5 pins and 6 tails. I'll take the combined measurement of all of my narrow sides of my pins. So if I made them an eighth like you do, that would be 5/8 of an inch. I subtract that 5/8 of an inch from the distance between my 2 half pins and then divide that by 6. And that gives me equally divided tails with the evenly spaced pins right in there. No problems whatsoever.
So you're actually laying out the beginning and ending of each pin and tail.
Right.
And I'm just laying out the center and then moving one way or the other.
I know it's getting convoluted.
Oh, I got to go get my math hat on. My goodness.
Well, I didn't say it was easy. This is why I don't do it on drawers.
I wouldn't either if I had to go through that kind of rigmarole.
That's it. We're out of time.
Hey, and join us every Tuesday and Thursday on 360woodworking.com for our regular podcast. I think you'll enjoy those as well. And we'll see you next year at the Woodworking shows.